A note to our listeners, this episode contains non-graphic discussion of suicide. Do I say welcome to In This Family if you've been here since the start of the show, John?
Well, it's still good to feel welcome. And I've always felt welcome, so thanks.
Welcome to In This Family, presented by Nexus Family Healing. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO. The thing about stories is that everybody has one. Everyone has been through things, and we're all on an ongoing journey. Telling those stories about yourself and hearing stories other people tell can help you make sense of your family, your relationships, your life, and yourself. Stories aren't just important, they're good medicine. That's what we do on this podcast. We are now a couple dozen episodes deep. If you're new to it, I encourage you to dive into the archive because there are some incredible conversations. Entertainers like Peter Sagal, Paul Scheer, and Dessa. Authors like Ashley C. Ford and Clancy Martin. Regular people like Gava and Chris Jameson, each with their own story that we can all learn from. I've been bringing you these episodes with the help of our producer, John Moe, and John has been doing this kind of work for quite a while. He's the author of the memoir, The Hilarious World of Depression, and he hosted a mental health podcast by that name for several years. He's now the host of the mental health podcast, Depresh Mode, with John Moe. He's written for the New York Times Magazine and teaches memoir writing at the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis. John's originally from Seattle and has lived in Minnesota since 2008. He's white, in his 50s, is married with 3 grown kids, and fosters rescue dogs. The work John does is all in the interest of sharing stories, his and other people's, because he knows they can help people. That's a shared belief that John and I have, and it's shared by everyone here at Nexus Family Healing. Can you tell us in what ways mental health has shown up in your life in order to give us a context?
Yeah, I mean, in my own personal life, it was in my family. There were mental health issues in my family since long before I was born. I mean, I trace it back to my parents, who were kids in Norway when the Nazis invaded.
Wow.
And my dad must have been 9 and my mom was 6. Incredibly vulnerable, formative ages. And their country got invaded. There were soldiers in the streets and there were people disappearing. And at that time, they didn't know how long that would go on. And I just think how horrifying that would be and the effect that must have had on their parents and their ability to function. My oldest sister was born in Norway, and then the whole family moved to America. And when I look at the substance use disorder that my father had with alcohol, it's not surprising. The more I learn about mental health, like, oh, okay, he has been through trauma. Therapy, medication, not an option for that generation or situation. And so cigarettes and vodka were available.
Yeah.
And that's the treatment that he went with. And so by the time I came along, I'm the youngest of 4. The drinking was just an established part of his life, and I didn't know that other dads did that. I didn't know that you could talk to other dads after 7 p.m., which I couldn't with my dad, but I thought that was just normal. And so, there were issues in the family, but it's the only family I knew, so I didn't know anything about it. I tended to be an anxious kid, a worried kid, and then around junior high, when puberty hit, when that new rush of hormones hit, something just got knocked off the shelf. I was despairing. I was up and down. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that this was a thing called depression. I'd heard about puberty, but I'm like, this isn't what they told me about in health class. This is something else. And I kept it quiet because it felt so strange that I just didn't want to do anything about it.
At the time, did you have the word depression at that time? So
No.
what were you experiencing as, wow, I better keep this to myself?
Well, I had heard the word depression, but it didn't. I thought it was just being sad, and this felt way more chaotic than that. This felt like moments of terror. This felt like not being able to pay attention. In junior high, something would happen, like, I'd get an answer wrong in class, or somebody would tease me about something, and I would just not be able to stop crying. It was like something was wrong with my eyes. I'm like, oh my God. And like, it came from an emotional place, but I couldn't let go of the emotion. Like everything was dysregulated, and I felt like something wasn't working.
And thinking back to your parents too, and your siblings, clearly your parents had massive trauma related to the Nazis, the war, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do other people in your family also have, a true mental health issue that they have also struggled with, in addition to the reactions to the trauma?
It's interesting. I mean, my brother died by suicide after many years of a drug dependency, and then a long climb towards what he told us was sobriety. We don't really know. He didn't share a lot of information with us, but he swore he was clean. And I think there was some depression. I think there was some learning disabilities that when he grew up, there was a term for learning disabilities back then, which was you're a dumb kid or a bad kid. And he had trouble reading. I'm sure he was dyslexic, but it was treated as his fault. And I think a lot of that piled up on him. I have 2 older sisters, but we haven't spent a lot of time talking about it really. So I think everybody had something going on, but there was sort of a tacit agreement that let's just go our own way and do what we can. And that, it's funny, that took the form of, being the youngest, I'd watch people grow up, and when they got to about 16 or so, they were just out of the house all the time. They were at friends' houses. They were driving around. They were somewhere. I don't know where they were. But they just weren't home. I think they were escaping in their own way. And it didn't seem strange to me, because the family you grow up in is your definition of normal, however abnormal it may seem to others. And so I thought, and then I did the same thing. When I got to driving age and my friends were at driving age, I was just never home. And I think we were all running from something, but we just thought it was normal.
Wow. So what I kept thinking and feeling when you were talking about that is this sense of just emotional isolation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Among your family. And I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more about that. What have you made sense of where that is coming from in your family?
I think part of it is culturally Norwegian.
Yeah.
I think there's a sort of remove a little bit. There's a sort of, just buck up and go on your way kind of mentality that I think even precedes World War II. I think it's just the way it is. And I think it was that and the larger cultural thing. Like, we just didn't really know how to deal with it. I remember years later, after something of a breakdown, my dad agreed to go talk to someone about his drinking. And he said, when he realized, I'm going to have to go talk to somebody, when he made that decision, I'm going to have to talk to somebody the next day, he said out loud, "This feels like dying. I feel like I'm dying."
Wow.
The idea of being separated from alcohol felt like death to him. But, also, it's funny, we would kind of all be in our own world a little bit, but we could still enjoy comedy. we would, if Carol Burnett was on, we would gather around to watch Carol Burnett. If the PBS station was showing Monty Python episodes, we would gather for Monty Python. I would do my best to try to stay awake for Saturday Night Live to watch it with my older siblings. Comedy was a love language in our family. And again, like this is what's so great about our show, about In This Family. Like, you can see the continuity. So like that represented love, nurturing, acceptance. The Carol Burnett show, and so I grow up, I get into comedy. Like, I've done so much comedy work in so many different fields. Even my book and my original podcast about that has the word hilarious built into it, because to me, that's warmth, that's family, that's stability. And so my relationship with comedy, which is an entertainment to most people, is much more foundational to me.
Yeah, that has really been, it sounds like an outlet, but I love to hear that there's so many positive associations with it to bring that sense of safety and release and camaraderie with the comedy, that you could associate that with love and warmth and
joy.
Bonding and joy. Yeah. That's great. So really, needless to say, your family really wasn't talking about feelings.
No, I mean, not really. There was like petty arguments between siblings and picking on each other, but also, like, again, it was the laughs. Like, if you could make the family laugh, like, that's what I learned early on. And I do think, I have 3 kids of my own. I think the youngest child often has a bit of an advantage, because if they're precocious, they can land a punchline no one expects and get a cheap laugh that way. So I benefited from that. But my dad was so funny in a completely dry Norwegian way, like dropping a punchline that you wouldn't even realize was a joke for several more days. And you're like, oh my God. I think that's how we connect. I think other families do that through sports or music or grades, other ways that they can connect that are more concrete and more identifiable than emotional vulnerability. Here are my issues. Here is the pain I'm in. Here is the joy that I've found. I think that's really hard for a lot of people, and so they do it on the football field or the gymnastics meet.
Well, I definitely want to get more into your experiences with your depression. But before we do that, I know that a lot of people do have experiences where their parent uses substances, alcohol, and it's a problem. So I just wondered if I could just ask you a couple questions about your dad. Can you guys, you did a really nice job of explaining how you just thought this was how every family was. Yeah. Can you highlight just a couple things about the effect that your dad's drinking had on you in particular?
It made me really excited to spend time with him when I could. Yeah. And so he, like, Saturday mornings were big for us. We would watch Bugs Bunny together, and it was just usually me and him. Sunday we would watch football together. That was really exciting. The Seahawks or the Vikings, whoever was playing, it would just be a joyous thing. And it occurred to me later, those are all like morning. On the West Coast, the early football games start at 10 a.m. Those were all morning and early afternoon activities. And later in the day, he would go to the liquor cabinet and make himself the first in a series of very, very strong drinks, and then kind of check out. And so at night, like, I'd be in my room or I'd watch TV or something. And so it was just the pattern. But when I could get his attention, it was tremendous. When he would volunteer to help out at the soccer games when I was on a soccer team. Like, he'd go to the games with me. He'd be a line judge. He would, cheer the team on, and then, we'd go get a soda and a comic book afterwards. And so, like, I really loved the one-on-one time. Boy, there's a lot of stuff I haven't thought about in a while.
Yeah.
I loved that one-on-one time I would get with him, because I sort of sensed how valuable it was, I think, because it wasn't available like after 5, and so I would just enjoy it on the weekends when I got it.
Well, to me, that just is another theme of, you knew when the emotional isolation was going to begin.
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't spoken. Yeah.
And I didn't think of it as isolation.
Sure,
either.
You didn't.
Like, it was just like, oh yeah, that's, it's like the sun going down. Like, okay,
Right.
yeah, now I can't play outside anymore. Now my dad's not available anymore. Like, I just didn't even think about it.
Right. It was just part of life.
Yeah. But I think I
Well-
was also denied a lot of things in the process. Then
Like
that really-
what? Like what?
Well,
Say more.
I mean, this is what I've often talked with people about and heard people talk about on our show and in other conversations I've had. Like, if you, like, I didn't have the nurturing and the conversations and the engagement with him, with my parents, that I try to give to my kids. I'm up on what's happening in their lives, and I'm not running it for them. I'm not interfering, but I'm aware, and I just didn't have that. And so I think when you are missing something as a kid, you go find a substitute for it as a kid, and then you try to construct it as an adult. And so I was very fond of my friends' parents, especially their dads. I had good relationships with my friends' dads. And I'm sure they knew what was going on, and they kind of helped me out a little bit more. Then I found theater, and I found, this, like, a theater, like, especially in live plays, can be a very family-like, nurturing atmosphere. And so I sought that out. I was pretty good at it, so I got a lot of opportunities. But I think I was filling in something that was missing. And then as I grew up, I kept doing theater, and until such time as I started having I got married and started having my own kids, and then for some reason just didn't feel like doing theater anymore. So I think we kind of just construct the things that we're missing out of the materials that we have on hand.
Oh, yeah. Really good point. Really good point. All right. I want to dive deeper into your depression. And you mentioned that, I think you said something about, kind of up to your age of 30, It was just a really heavy time, whirlwind of things going on. Are there, and you didn't know at the time that you had this thing called depression. You didn't know what was going on. Yeah. Can you talk about some different pivotal times up until 30 that really stood out for you that manifested your depression?
Yeah. There was just times that I would go through that were very dark, where my mood was very dark, where I would kind of isolate. There were road rage incidents that happened, where I didn't get out of the car, thankfully, but was just, felt like a demon taking over. And there was just sort of this sense of like, remember who you really are. You're messed up. Remember junior high, it was still kind of carrying this deep secret. And what I found was that I had kind of a stress responsive depression. And so when I was kind of young, and my wife and I, girlfriend and then wife, and I didn't have any kids, and we were renting, and we were kind of in our 20s in Seattle, and, working crappy jobs. Things felt really loose. And then we bought a house. I got a career going in writing, working as an editor at Amazon, and then working in radio, and I, had a public profile, and then kids were there. Like, things got real serious.
Yeah.
You're playing for keeps at that point. And the incredible demands that being a parent brings you. And I just started to kind of crack a little bit. Like, I got really short-tempered, and so it started to just get bigger and bigger until Jill, my wife, said, "Hey, I think you need to go to the doctor and ask about depression." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to," because, and these were my reasons. One, I don't want to hassle the doctor with my problems.
Oh, jeez.
Despite the fact that this is a doctor's job.
Yes.
Your problems are what doctors do.
They're getting paid for this.
I thought better for that doctor to talk to other people more worthy. And then I also said, I don't want to pay the copay. Our copay at the time was $10.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't think I was worth a Hamilton. And so, and finally she's, we had 2 kids by that point. She said, "Okay, well, you're not going to do it for yourself. Will you do it for me and the kids?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it for you and the kids." And so I go to this doctor, and he checks me out and runs some tests and asks me a bunch of questions. And he says, "Well, you're depressed. You have major depressive disorder."
I also want to ask you some more about the anger. You talked about you had some instances of road rage. Luckily, you never got out of the car. That's very good. That can be a common experience among people with depression, is that it can come out as anger.
Yeah.
Can you speak just a little bit about how that played a role in your life? Was it just 1 or 2 times, or was it increasingly getting more present as you were having kids and the stresses of being an adult?
Yeah. I mean, it was always there. Like, it was there from a really early age. And when something would not work, I could get to anger pretty quick. And it was growing up, if I got angry, nobody would speak to me. Like, I would go storm off to my room. Nobody would come in seeing how I was doing. They would just wait it out. And as a result, I felt very ashamed of it. So I associated anger with shame. And then it would show up over the years, like not much and not strongly, but it was always like it was inside me. I would feel like furious about things. And I've become very curious about anger, later now in my life and in the kind of work that I do. And so often the anger is this defense mechanism for when you feel you've been hurt. Like, it's a counteroffensive. It's stockpiling weapons so you don't get hurt anymore, so you can attack. And there's fear under there. There's injustice under there. There's all sorts of things that it rides on top of, and it can change for what it's doing there. But I've found so much. I found it so interesting, like intellectually interesting, to when I feel that now, and everybody does sometimes. When I feel that now, I try to stop and kind of ask the anger some questions.
Oh,
like okay, so you're popping up here, huh? So you've stopped by. What's happening? Well, I'm angry about this. Okay, what is it about this they are angry about? Well, I feel like I got ripped off. Okay, why is getting ripped off? Everybody gets ripped off sometimes. What about that makes you angry? Well, I'm really sad that I've lost this thing that got taken from me. Okay, so there's some sadness there. Like, that kind of inquisition, that kind of self-interviewing has been really revelatory for me.
I am so glad that you walked us through such a great example of that, because that's when we're children and we're going through these things, that's what we don't know how to do. We don't know how to do that yet. And anger is a secondary emotion. It's easier and sometimes to feel anger, and sometimes the anger comes out because we can't hold it back anymore. But it's really the feelings underneath that are trying to get expressed. So that's a great tool that you use for yourself. So I want to hear, so you finally are told this is depression. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you bought into it. You didn't resist that. Other things that you did once you knew what you were dealing with, what are some things that you did over time to help address it, manage it, go through your journey?
Well, it was rocky because I think for a while I mistook knowledge of the problem for treating the problem. Like
such a great point, John. So
I had this problem and like, okay, that's explained. Now I can move on with my life. And, it didn't really work like that. I tried the first set of meds they gave me, and then, that wasn't working. They were tweaking me out, and I called the doctor and I said, I guess meds don't work. He's like, well, those meds didn't work. Let's try some other meds. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I felt like I'd failed the meds.
Jeez.
And, I kind of kept it at bay. And, some things would kind of crop up. I would get to therapy and, not stick with it. And that was the case for a long time with therapy, because I would approach therapy as something, I would approach it like car repair, like bring myself in, somebody would fix me and I'd go on my way. And whereas I needed to approach it much more like personal training, where I could identify my issues and work on them. And it took many years to, I think I've been with my current therapist for coming up on 10 years now.
Oh, great.
And it wasn't until that therapist that I kind of realized, I've got to do the work. Like she can help me understand things. We can work on things together, but this is a commitment where I need to take all the action. And that's when things really started to click. I mean, I kept it at bay to some extent because I thought, well, when I'm not as busy, I'll treat my depression. But then when my brother Rick died, there did take on more of a sense of urgency as I understood viscerally what depression could lead to.
Well, and that might be a really good segue to start talking about your brother, but I want to ask you one other thing about this. You said then you had to really do the work. What was that work, John?
It was
what is that work? Not just was, right?
Work?
What is that work?
Well, it's like, like we've talked about with this show, it's like, okay, what happened back there? What happened? What were you raised as? What was around you? How were problems addressed or not addressed? And how that formed you. And, I will say it's not about blaming the past. It's about understanding the present. Mm-hmm. It's understanding how you got to where you are, and in what direction are you pointed? And is that the direction you want to go? Mm-hmm. Or can you turn? And so, it's been a lot of understanding that. It's been a lot of understanding kind of, those relationships in my family of origin, which are still going. My dad and my brother have passed, but my mom and my two sisters are still with us. And, like, what does that relationship mean? And then, trying to make some conscious decisions around thought patterns.
Yeah.
It's cognitive behavior therapy. Figuring out like, okay, when I'm rejected for something, which happened plenty of times as an actor, as it does to all actors, plenty of times as a writer, as it does to all writers. Like, where do my thoughts go? Okay, they head towards shame. Like, I was rejected because I am not good at this thing that I purport to be good at. And if I'm not good at that thing, that's my best thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I am worthless. And so that's where rejection would take me. If there wasn't an achievement at the end of it, then something must be wrong. And so it's kind of reprogramming that to say, like, okay, does every pair of shoes in the world fit you? No, this thing didn't fit. So, okay, try on some more shoes. And so there's been work to consciously reprogram that. There's been conscious work around trauma with EMDR. It's again, like, I come back to, maybe it's because I've been interviewing people about mental health for 10 years now. It's a lot of self-interviewing. Like, what do I want to ask myself about this situation that I'm in?
Well, let's shift to your brother. You mentioned before that you saw him struggle perhaps with some mental health stuff. It sounds like you alluded to some depression, maybe some other things that he was perhaps dealing with. Definitely the substance abuse hit for him. Tell us a little bit about your brother's mental health and how that played out.
Well, he was the second oldest of the four of us, and he was, he was my hero. He was funnier than anybody, and super smart, but like got terrible grades. Was one of those guys. I think it was ADHD and dyslexia now, but back then, again, they just called him a bad kid.
Yeah.
But dumb kids don't read science journals when they're 12, like he was doing. And so, he wouldn't really fit in. And when he was 15 or 16, he got a part-time job at the airport. My dad worked at the airport, and so he found him a job there. And, the guys there did smoked pot, they did speed, they did cocaine, and he enjoyed that. He kind of got caught up in that world.
Yeah.
And ran with kind of a shadowy crowd. There was just like a sense that he was up to something. We didn't know what. And when he got older, like I think he finally did finish high school. He didn't graduate on time. I think he did a GED thing or something. My other sisters went to the University of Washington and got excellent grades, and it just wasn't who he ended up being. But he got promoted at his company, and then he was running this office in Sacramento at the airport, and then they transferred him to San Diego, and he was running an office there. And then we sort of found out he didn't work there anymore, and that maybe he was driving a truck, and he didn't seem to have a fixed address, and he always needed money. And so that continued for a very long time. And what we know now is that he was doing methamphetamine, and, kind of couch surfing for years and years and years. Most charming guy in the world. And often people with a drug addiction can be incredibly charming because they need to get things from people. And then when, we'd kind of hear from him off and on, and we'd hear that he sobered up, and then he was sort of in our lives a little bit more. And, by that point, my father had passed, and he was very close with my mom. And then one day he ended his life.
I'm so sorry.
There were things I wrote about in a book that I had written the previous fall. And he died under circumstances similar to what I had written about in the book. And when we went to his apartment to collect his things, my book was by his bed. And
wow.
I've had a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
Ever since 2007, because I've felt like I killed him, and I know I didn't. I've done lots of therapy. I understand that I didn't, and also simultaneously, deep down, I can't help feeling like I did.
So it sounds like that still stays with you right now.
It's always with me, and when it was a few years later that I started talking more openly about mental health, about my mental health, and about him. And that became my life's work. I mean, in the same way that my mom became a nurse because her sister died, I became a mental health advocate because of my brother. And, and it's sort of messed up, I think, but also not, because it's the most meaningful work I could possibly think to do. And if I could save somebody else's brother, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, and there's the complexity again, right? You're going down a really tough road of your own mental health, but also the trauma around your brother's death, and you feeling like you're connected to that somehow. And at the same time, look how rich your life is because you're taking these issues and doing something with it. Making, your life is completely different because you are integrating this in to your life, your profession, everything.
Well, but even then I have to be really careful, because when I started talking about this stuff and got an audience for it very quickly, because people 10 years ago, and I think even now, are starving to talk about these issues, because we still live in a society that shames it. It's gotten better, but it's still a tough issue. But I would talk about things on my show, and I would get letters from people saying, "Hey, you saved my life. Your show saved my life. I am alive because of you." And at first it's flattering and it feels wonderful. And then it quickly became like, oh no, what if I had a bad show?
Oh, no.
What if the interview didn't go well? What if I put out a rerun that week, or all these lives are in my hands. I talked to a friend of mine, a musician named John Darnielle. He's with a band called the Mountain Goats. And he's been through a lot of things in his life, and he writes very personal, often very painful songs. And I said, surely you have had this happen to you, these people who say this to you. He said, oh yeah, I hear about this literally several times a week. And I said, how do you carry that? And he said, well, John, the good news is you didn't save their life. And what you did, and what I do with my songs, he said, we try to build tools that people can use to save their own lives.
Yeah.
And if they're so far down in the hole, they don't see themselves as capable of doing something like saving a life.
Yeah.
So they say, this show or this song saved my life.
Yeah.
All we did, I'm glad that the tools I built were used for something good. But all I did was make tools. And
that's great.
And that has saved me in so many ways.
Great pearls of wisdom.
Yeah.
So John, you talk about the wise self, you talk about the self-questioning. I mean, clearly you've already referenced that intellectually, that you're not responsible for your brother's death. How do you manage intellectually knowing that and the feeling like that's not true?
I think with depression, I think with a lot of mental illness, I think with trauma, it's such an old voice. It's coming from such an old part of you. And because it's so old, you mistake it for wise and true. And so, this voice that tells me you're dumb, you're worthless, you're not as good as other people, that's the voice I've been hearing longer than any other voice. And so it's interrogating that and saying, okay, does that really hold up? Does that, if you look at all the evidence, all the people who love you, all the things you've done, that are worthwhile. Not just career, but like as a human. Does that add up? That doesn't really add up. And so, the voice that says you killed your brother, I can say, all right, I understand how you might feel that way, but you're not going to speak for the majority. We'll let you stay in the room and have your opinion. But you're not going to carry the day.
Yeah. Good.
And that's, this is, some people said, well, why are people with depression tired all the time? And I often say, it's because they work so goddamn hard.
Yeah.
Because it's, a lot of people could just breeze through the day. A lot of the rest of us have to have these conversations within ourselves.
Yeah.
And, if you've ever been in a day full of meetings, it's exhausting.
Yes.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. And it's unfortunately also a way for you to reject yourself too, to keep that cycle going, which is not a good thing. And it's a cycle you want to keep breaking when it happens. It's so ironic, John, that isn't it so true that a lot of comedians and people who go into showbiz, have experiences of mental health, they have experiences of depression, and these folks tend to go into showbiz, which is probably like the worst place to have acceptance. It's like putting yourselves in the spot of being rejected. I mean, there's two professions that probably experience the most rejection. Mm-hmm. Any kind of showbiz, comedy, acting, maybe writing, but definitely not more than comedy and acting, and being a salesperson. You couldn't experience more rejection in that line of work. And isn't it ironic that a lot of people who really do experience depression go into these self-rejecting spaces?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's among the reasons I kind of de-emphasized acting after a while, was because and it's been a challenge too, because like with making podcasts or being in radio, it's easy to give yourself over to the work that you're doing and have that mean the same thing as your sense of self. And so if my podcast is getting a lot of downloads, I'm a good person. And if it's not, I'm a bad person. And if I got a callback for this show, then I'm worthy. And if not, I'm not worthy. And it's a real challenge. I mean, at the same time, the process of creating art, whether that's through acting or radio or writing or something like that, is a way of reconnecting to something greater than yourself. And it's a way of connecting to something human. And it can be really, really rewarding at the same time. I mean, the way I've addressed that is I kind of left the acting behind a little bit. I still do some here and there. But I leaned into writing because, with an empty page, I don't need an invitation. I can start writing what I want to make. And when I got into radio and podcasting, here's an idea that I have that I feel like I could get behind. And then it can, come to full bloom. To me, there's the experience of making art, whether it's a song, I've been in bands for many years too, whether it's making a song or, our episode with Clancy Martin, Va, it's here's something beautiful that didn't exist before we made it, and now it's part of the world. I still just get so excited thinking about it.
That gives me chills. It's beautiful. Okay, so we're going to talk about some more tough stuff here. So a warning to the listeners. Did you have thoughts of suicide in your own life? Have you had that experience?
Yes. In high school, things were hard, and it seemed like this big, powerful option. It was more. It's always been a lot more ideation than anything. It's the thoughts of suicide. Like, I don't know that I've ever had a clear intent. And then it came up later in life, which is, I write about it in the book. It's a very, very painful part of the book it was painful for me to write. It's been painful for people I love to read. It's caused a lot of pain, but it's part of the story, where I kind of confronted the thought of it and opted against it. And again, it's more like an unwelcome guest that walks into the house than something that I've sought out. And so it's been a matter of like, okay, what are you doing here? What is this about? What is this? Is this about a fear of a loss of money? Is this is this losing status? Like, what have you tied existentially to your very being that is threatening to pull you underwater, and how can you cut that loose? So yeah, it's been a ghost in my house for sure.
I love your analogies. They fit so well. Really, really creates the picture and this power that you have found through self-questioning. I hope other people can pick up on that and, see if that can fit for them, because it's important that you're asking yourself these questions.
Yeah.
This, where you said, you opted out and you knew that this was no longer an option. I want to lean into that a little bit more. What happened that made you declare and opt out of that as an option?
I think I saw the logic. I think I allowed myself to see the logic. There's, I talked with Dick Cavett about this years ago, and he's one of the first celebrities to ever talk about experiencing depression. So it was really an honor to interview him. And he talked about this fundamental logic paradox of like, you think about doing this because then you'd feel better, but there's no you to feel better. And, you will never have the relief from this if you go that route. And often, I know from talking to other people who've said, yes, I recognize that, but the pain is too unbearable. I'm familiar now with the term wise mind. I wasn't, it was fairly recently kind of came to understand that.
Well, explain that a little more for the listeners.
Well, there's the, as it is for me, it's like there's this sort of impetuous voice that talks about the problem, talk about an action, that feels pain and lashes out. And then it's, again, that stepping back and listening to, okay, what would I tell somebody else in this situation? How would I advise my best friend, my child, a stranger about this situation that they're in? And, often if you can do that, that wise mind has a lot of good things to say. It's a good friend. And, I think in those times that I've felt that, it's that knowledge that I wouldn't feel better. And it's that, knowledge that I would lose all the possibilities of feeling better. It's so hard to see a brighter day when you're in a deep pit. And to have, and for me, it wasn't even the confidence that a brighter day would come, but I was like, I want to allow the possibility that brighter day could come.
Yeah.
And that's been something I've held on to when things have been really hard.
Okay, I want to, going back and thinking about your brother's situation, This kind of goes into a little more challenging territory, I suppose, but there could be people out there, there are people out there suffering right now, struggling right now with thoughts of
Hmm.
suicide. And it seems so deep for them. I wonder what kind of message of help or, just reaching out of a message that you can give people who are thinking about this from a perspective of somebody who's been left behind, of somebody
Mm.
who's taken their life.
I believe that when Rick died, and he left behind a girlfriend who was pregnant with his child, that his pain got dispersed as if by a will to everybody he left behind. I in the months that followed, I got a phone call from his friend Jay, who was always in our house growing up. They hadn't really been friends since about 16. But Jay had heard about this, and Jay called me in such pain and looking for answers that I didn't have. And the pain that I had, the pain that other people who knew him had, even people he had who were fed up with him because he had been an addict and he had been a liar and he had done some bad things. It just got passed around, and I don't think people want to do that. I don't think they want to spread that around. I wouldn't. I think in trying to talk people out of something like that, a lot of people make the mistake of trying to shift someo's reality. Like, it's not that bad. Like saying it's not that bad. It is that bad.
Yeah, it is.
For me, there's been the hope of the possibility of a better day, not a guarantee of a better day, but there's an Octavia Butler story where they talk about the idea of God, and if there's any God to believe in, it's the concept of change. It's the only thing that is constant through the entire history of the universe, down to everybody's life. So if you want to worship something, worship change. and if we can accept that change is constant, then we can accept that our current mental state is not the mental state we will have for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
Go for a ride with that one.
Yeah, wonderful share. Thank you for that. And I'm so sorry to hear about your struggles with your brother and your brother's death. And but thank you for those powerful shares. Really meaningful. I want to talk a little bit about how this has affected your parenting. I want to lean in on just a little bit more of that. How has your own experience, your brother's experience, the way your family was, dynamics that you realize now, how has that influenced or changed perhaps your parenting?
It's made me at times hyper vigilant, hyper aware. Like I to a fault try to attend every sports game, and like I've overcompensated for things that I felt were neglected. But on the positive side, my wife and I decided early on, like, we were just going to be honest about mental health and treat it like anything else. And like, I remember my daughter at one point said, well, what happens, when I had talked to her about what depression was, she's like, well, what happens if I grow up and I get this? And I said, then we become aware of it and we treat it, and we go on with our life. I said, do you think that I have a happy life? And she said, yeah. And I said, yeah, I do. I do have a happy life. I just have to do a little bit of work on something here.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think too, like, man, if you ever want to get inspired, go talk to young people because they, you know, they're more native to an open conversation about it.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring to see. And so we've been open about it. We've talked about it. They're aware of how their uncle died. They're aware of substance use disorder that's in the family. They're you know, we've talked about, like, there's all these stories of just amazing things happening with family on both sides.
Yeah.
that you know, family lore that's like, oh yeah, I see the mental disorders there. You know, and we just try to keep it in the language. You know, not like it's not a matter, and we try to make it clear too, like, okay, you're depressed, still got to go to school. You still got to write that paper. You know, let's talk about what's underpinning that, and then let's talk about what you got to do anyway. You know, and that's the balance that I'm hoping to usher them into their adulthood with. Yeah,
that's great. I think it's really important for our generation, where it hasn't always been okay to talk openly about mental health. It has been such a thing behind the scenes. And I agree that the kids nowadays, they are more open. So us as parents, if we can learn to talk about these things, that generation is going to be there for the conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And, you know, and I mean, and I always say, like, my only goal, I tell my kids this, I at least want to screw up in different ways than my parents screwed up. Like, I just don't want to screw up in the same way. That lacks imagination. Like, I want to screw up in new ways that you'll be traumatized by years down the road that are different than how I was.
Exactly. So for the fun of it, what are some ways you might possibly be screwing up your kids, John? Have they told you yet?
Let's see. I make jokes about things that aren't funny. And I think I'm all up in their business a little too much. I think I'm a little, I think I ask questions that I don't really need the answers to.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have them on our show sometime in the future.
Yes. Yeah, I'll book them for a future episode.
Yeah, there we go. Well, this has been absolutely wonderful. I've really enjoyed this time. It's great to hear your story and the passion behind, you know, your involvement in this show, and truly, like you said, bringing it to life, making something, and maybe it will touch somebody's life and help them in a way that we will never know and maybe don't know, but hopefully it helps and people can connect with the story.
It's always going to be interesting. You know, there's always interesting stories to hear. Never-ending supply.
John, where do people find you and your work?
Just search on Google for my name. I have 2 podcasts that I host, Depresh Mode with John Moe and Sleeping with Celebrities. And my book, The Hilarious World of Depression, is available in all bookstores.
In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing, a national nonprofit mental health organization. You can learn more about Nexus and how to support our mission at nexusfamilyhealing.org. The show is produced by John Moe with music from Jeremy Messersmith. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and write a review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.